We are finally live, I think. Hello and welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel and to our Q&A part 2, our weekend Q&A. Usually we do these usually do these. Used to be Saturdays at 6. Now it's Saturdays at 3 p.m. Eastern, all Eastern Standard Time. But today we are starting at 1 p.m. bright and early compared to our usual start times. We have live streams 6 p.m. on Fridays, 3 p.m. on Saturdays, and 4 p.m. on Sundays. Now, I'm not going to be here at 3 p.m. So I decided to do a live stream before then to give you some friendly neighborhood history in case I am not back by 6 p.m. However, I've decided I think I will be back by 6 p.m. and I'm going to do a bonus Q&A just for all of you out there, where I'll be answering all of your questions regarding history and social studies, like I always do. But that will be from 6 to 7 here on YouTube, and that'll be our third Q&A this weekend. So you get a bonus extra Q&A from me, and I think that's really, 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 really good. So yeah. Yes, Harry, you can shut down those arguments, whatever they are. So I'm going to pick a nice historical background. We welcome you to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. We appreciate you joining us, where we do history in a friendly, neighborly manner, 24/7, 365 or 366 days a year. And for the next hour or so, I will be answering all of your questions regarding history and social sciences on different topics, like we do every Friday and Saturday. We're just doing it earlier today. Please vote here on YouTube, exclusively on YouTube, for our live stream lecture topic. Tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern, I will be presenting and lecturing about a particular historical topic. So please join us for that. And you know what? I love Impressionist art and some Neo-Impressionist art for you in the background, showing the changing artistic and cultural tides of the late 19th and early 20th century is Edvard Munch's 1895 The Scream, probably one of the most famous paintings in all of history. So I'm going to use that as my background today, and I think you guys will really enjoy it. So please like and subscribe, become a friendly neighborhood historian. Pull up something warm to drink, cold to drink, whatever you're in the mood for on this Saturday afternoon, and get ready for some history and social sciences. And early this evening, we will be back. So this is a two-parter today, sandwiched between me running a bunch of errands this afternoon. But I will be back hopefully at 6 p.m. for a bonus Q&A. So the least I could do since I'm not fulfilling my usual 3 p.m. time on Saturdays. So please like and subscribe. Helps the channel out, help the algorithm out, all of that great stuff. Check out all the long and short form content we have for you here, exclusively on the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. And yeah, enjoy as we talk about history and social studies. Drop a topic, comment, or question about history from all over the world, any time period, in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer it. I'm very glad to have you here. And just give me 1 second, please, and we'll get started. So Gaia Han, a longtime friendly neighborhood historian, someone who's liked and subscribed, is asking, what was the 30 Years' War about? The 30 Years' War starts a religious rebellion by the Bohemians, the Czech people, who are Protestant, against their Catholic Habsburg overlords, the Austrians. In 1618, a bunch of noble emissaries working for the Holy Roman Emperor go to Prague, and they are thrown out of the window. And this is called the Second Defenestration of Prague, because it wasn't the first time a bunch of people were thrown out of a window. This enraged the Habsburgs, who attacked Bohemia, and this led to a basically kind of a civil war within the Holy Roman Empire, which was very divided and scattered at this time, between Catholics in the Habsburg regions of Germany and the Bohemian Protestants. The Danes and later the Swedish come in different phases to help out their Protestant allies. And eventually, the French get involved fighting against the Habsburgs. So now it's a war between Catholics for power and territorial rights in Western and Central Europe. And so it's considered one of the bigger shifts that the war, when it ends, the religious conflict is far afield, and now it's much more of a political and social conflict. And with the Treaty of Westphalia, it establishes the idea of the nation state in 1648, 30 years after the war began. It allows the Dutch to gain full independence from the Spanish. They've been fighting them for 80 years. So the 30 Years' War is a subset of the 80 Years' War between the Dutch and the Spanish Habsburgs, because the Habsburgs controlled Spain and Austria at this time. This is when Spain built their huge empire in the New World. There's a lot going on with the Spanish and this royal European family, known for their inbreeding, but also known for their glory, power, might, and riches. That's the Habsburgs. Probably the most famous political family in royal history in Europe, other than maybe the Romanovs and, of course, the Tudors. Um, so, yeah, there's a quick answer about the 30 Years' War. Other questions about history and social studies? As I take a sip of coffee, hope you've got something warm to drink or enjoyable. Am I trans? No, but I welcome all sorts of people who are interested in history, be they trans or cis. We welcome people from every background, of every different social status to ask and discuss history and social studies with me. Hmm. But don't come on here just trolling because you will get banned. You will get a timeout and then you will get banned. So keep it on history and social studies. I apologize for those of you who joined us yesterday. I got way too distracted by all the nonsense in the chat. That was my fault, not anyone else's fault. And so I'm doubling down and disciplining myself to focus on history as much as I possibly can. Not on all of the other nonsense going on in the world right now. Not on a bunch of diverted topics that are philosophical and moral in nature. I will answer questions related to certain topics if I think there's a historical precedence to do so. You want me to give a perspective on a non-historical topic, then give me a super chat. Donate to the channel. All the money that goes into this channel helps me make the channel as great as I possibly can. What do you think of the city of London? Well, I mean, it's one of the biggest and most important cities in history. I think it's probably the most important city in Europe, other than maybe Paris or now Rome is the most important. My day has been good. I hope yours is going well, Benny. I mean, what do you mean about the city of London? I mean, there's so much to say about London. London's beautiful. It's amazing architecture. It's one of the most diverse cities in Europe and becoming increasingly one of the most diverse cities in the world. And of course, it started off as a Roman fortress, Londinium, and then of course, or I think it was called Erebakam, and then became Londinium. The Romans took it when the Romans conquered Britannia, and of course, sits on the Thames River, like many major cities. It sits on the Thames River. And yes, this is a history channel, Benny. There's no topic. It's just a Q&A. You can ask me, a historian, in my smoking gown, smoking jacket, my dressing gown, that turns me into History Hefner. Anything you'd like to about history or social studies. Oh, the financial district city? I don't know enough about it to really speak on it. So, do you think the fall of the Rome shares any characteristics of our current empire? Empires come and empires go. Empires rise in power and they fall in similar ways, and they're different in because of technological, cultural, historical context, but they aren't necessarily different in how they fall or what happens to them. So, yeah. Um, The Roman Empire suffered heavily from low birth rates, hyperinflation, corrupt leaders in government, barbarian invasions, an inability to build a robust military, maintain any of the cultural or artistic apparatuses that had united them during the Pax Romana, during the high point of the Roman Empire. And the death of the Roman Empire was slow. The third century saw a lot of chaos called the crisis of the third century. And then in the fourth century, you get a respite with emperors like Diocletian and Constantine, who really put the empire back aright. And then after Theodosius the Great, you see a precipitous decline in the western half of the empire after they are permanently split. That eventually ends in what we call the fall of Rome in 476, with the last Roman emperor being deposed. However, the truth of the matter is the Eastern Roman Empire considered itself to be very much the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire continuing. You would love to learn about ancient China. Well, there's a lot about ancient China. My favorite time period is European history, particularly in the last few centuries. And Russian history is my specific. I'm a trained historian. I have a master's and a bachelor's in history. My specific expertise is indeed in Russian history. But Benny, um, Chinese history is quite fascinating. You have this ancient imperial dynasty called the Xia, Xie. Xi is Xia in Chinese, um, who are considered to be, by many Western historians, um, mythical. But the Chinese consider them to be a real imperial dynasty that kind of is the first real that really creates the modicum of the empire in China. And that's carried on by the Shang and Zhao dynasties. And it's not until Qin Shi Huang in 221 BC that China is really united for the first time under an emperor. And he is the one who really gets the Great Wall started. He builds the Terracotta Army as his eternal grave, to his eternal burial mound where these terracotta warriors will protect him for all of life. Through his cruelty, malice, but also his brilliance and cunning, he is able to unify all of China under his banner and create an empire that is that will last on and off of different dynasties and iterations and interruptions in between for 20 more than 2,000 years. So something to think about there. How does the Indiana football program, connect to James Madison? Don't know. He was in charge of the University of Virginia, not the University of Indiana. Fair enough. It is one of the most interesting local governments. Only 9,000 people live there. Over 300,000 people work there. Their companies gets votes as well as people. Interesting. Yeah, very exciting times in Alberta. It looks like our independence from Canada is a go. I went in a Albertan independence discussion panel last night. David Parker was the keynote speaker. That'll be fascinating to see if that gets any traction. I would never think of any place of Canada seceding from the rest of it. That's very cool. Can you tell us something about Russian history? I don't know much. Oh my goodness. You're going to want to go back and watch my long form videos on Russia, my series on the Tsars, my ongoing series on Russian history, which I haven't uploaded some in a while, but I probably should. You'll probably, excuse me, you'll probably, I should get a cough button. They used to have them on the radio where you could press it, it would mute you. I guess I should mute myself. But the, any, all right. All right. Anyways, sorry. Hold on. Anyways, my point being that you don't. I'm not just telling you to go watch my content to enjoy the channel. I can tell you a lot about Russian history. Russia is started by a mix of Slavic peoples and Vikings um, that become kind of one people along the Don, Dnieper, and Volga rivers. They establish certain settlements that are extremely important, like Pskov, Novgorod, and of course Kiev, and the Kievan Rus become the dominant military and political power in that region in the 9th and 10th centuries. And eventually they are conquered by the Mongols in the 13th century. And the people are reorganized under the banner of Muscovy, Moscow being the most powerful city of various different disunited city states that were kind of under constant threat of invasion and were constant tributaries to the Golden Horde or the Ugatai Khanate for centuries. So there's a little bit of history on Russia. There's a lot more. There's a lot more detail I could go into in all those things. They convert to Orthodox Christianity under a man named Vladimir the Great, the grandson of one of the most famous women in history, at least I think, one of the most famous women in Eastern European history, one of the most interesting women in all of history, in my opinion, uh, Olga, who, in order to avenge her husband's death, uh, uh, chased down her husband's murderers, trapped them, and killed them all. Um, yeah, and then allowed her son to basically ransack their lands when he became the ruler of the Kievan Rus. So there's a little bit of history there. But the real bombshell came from the American delegate with all the support offered to the movement by the current administration in the USA. Well, that's not a surprise. That shouldn't be a shock that the United States is so ready to support Albertan independence. How did the split between the Catholic and Orthodox Church affect Russia? Well, 1054, you have the Kievan Rus. They're definitely under the Orthodox banner. They're Eastern Christians. They have a connection to the Greek Orthodox Church. 1054, there is a mutual condemnation and excommunication by the Patriarch of Constantinople and the representative, the papal legate of the Pope in Byzantium or Constantinople at that time, and there had been a precipitous decline in the relationship between the Eastern and Western Christian churches throughout much of the uh, Middle Ages. The West speaks Latin and is influenced heavily by theology from people like Augustine. The East is influenced more by more mystical ancient traditions. They have the oldest Christian holy sites when they were originally when they weren't conquered by the Muslims, such as Jerusalem. So there had been a precipitous decline in the relationship between the East and its bishops not willing to recognize the unilateral authority of the Bishop of Rome, aka the Pope, and the differences in languages and culture. The East is ruled by an emperor, is directly connected between church and state. The Byzantine emperor, the Eastern Romans, as they call themselves, are still going strong. And the West has already fractured and fallen apart into various kingdoms that are kind of unified through the administration, spiritually, of the Christian sacraments by the Pope. So it's a complex thing, but their divide was a long time coming, and 1054 is really a crescendo, not the beginning of the divide between Catholics and Orthodox Christians. And the Russians fall into line with the Orthodox because they had originally converted to Christianity through interactions with Constantinople. Thank you, cause we're American. Um, U.S. has already confirmed they will recognize and guarantee Alberta's independence, as well as offering their protection as a protectorate until we are able to draft our own constitution. I mean, would that really go anywhere, Greg? I just don't see it. But let's get to some history and social studies. Yeah, I instead of oh, good to see you, robotic duck. But yeah, I've got coffee instead of hot tea, and uh, I've had a bad voice all week. So, who defeated the Mongols? The Mamelukes in Egypt, the Dai Viet in Southeast Asia. Alexander Nevsky, famously in Lithuania, was able to avoid and bamboozle the Mongols, so he was able to keep not Lithuania, Novgorod independent. So yes, Kiev has been the proto has have been the proto-Europeans. Is that correct? No, they're the proto-Russians, if you want to call them that, and they're the proto-Ukrainians. Let me see here. Why are we getting all political? Let's get back to the history. Um, why were the Greeks so ahead of everyone else in science? A spirit of learning, an interest in education, in the development of different ideas, um, especially in Athens. You also have it in the Minoans in Crete and the Mycenaeans. Um, Basically, the Greeks were always very open to philosophical and intellectual discussions and discoveries. And this culture permeated a lot of different areas of Greece and allowed them to build a very, very robust military because of their technology there, such as the hoplites and the phalanx formation. But it also allowed them to create a very, very a successful political situation where they were where they were in their different city states able to go their own routes and make their own discoveries. What are the most powerful ancient people who lived in Spain? Um, there were different barbarian groups that the Romans and the Carthaginians encountered. I would say the Romans eventually kind of just throw them all into their own, um, just kind of absorb them. You have Trajan, the Roman emperor, who comes from Spain. So Spain, in its most ancient times, is most powerful when it's controlled by the Romans. Oh yeah, today's Pi Day, and it's Einstein's. Is it Einstein's birthday? Yeah, March 14th, 3.14. I'm not a scientist, so I can't say much about it. Who painted the Scream? It was Edvard Munch. It's an 1895 Norwegian painting, and I am using it because it represents the extremely popular, extremely powerful Impressionist and Neo-Impressionist movement and its effect on the development of European utopianism in the late 19th century. Would you agree that the death of George S. Patton was an accident and that the idea he was murdered is ridiculous? Probably. Do you think the ancient Egyptians were advanced for their time? Absolutely. Why didn't Hannibal attack Rome? I think he was just trying to get them to leave him alone and to agree to leave him alone. And I didn't think he actually thought that his campaign would get as far as it did. It was a terrorist campaign, if you really want to talk about it. It was guerrilla warfare on your opponent's home turf, which is, I think, a pretty radically thoughtful way to fight war. I think Hannibal's brilliant. I just think he bit off more than he could chew. I don't think anyone's beating the Romans at that point, especially after Scipio invades Africa and does to Hannibal what Hannibal had done to them. The Romans, the only way they could ever defeat Hannibal was to do what he did. Consider the whole conspiracy theory that he was murdered came out of fiction. I repeat, fiction book published in 1974. See, Patton had this idea. Patton had always jarred and fought against the mainstream. Anyone who does that, who dies in a non-natural setting, is often considered by conspiracy theorists and others to be possibly the victim of a micromanaged conspiratorial death. Patton was also advocating for radical anti-communist measures, including an invasion of Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union by the U.S. Army. This was not popular with a war-weary nation for obvious reasons, but Patton may have been right. I don't know if the U.S. had. That's a big counterfactual. If the U.S. had just pushed on and turned the war against the Soviets, I don't know that the Soviet Army can withstand American productivity. But again, I don't know if the Americans can withstand the Russian winter. Um, Yeah, Hershey claims a s'more, but they didn't invent it. I think it's considered a scout tradition, you know? Did Herod the Great stink what? I don't know about that. E-Dog, think of better questions. How do you think they built the pyramids? It's shocking. Large amounts of manpower, working for large amounts of time, including slaves. It's not impossible. It's geometrically sound. People back then were not stupid. We want to adopt the alien thing because A, we want to believe in aliens, but we can believe in aliens and not believe the aliens built the pyramids. Those two positions are very, very possible to hold on to. And at the same time, we also want to think that we're smarter than they are. We're not. We have better technology, but that's about it. In fact, I would say humans might be getting dumber. Good to see you, King. The new Nuremberg movie. I didn't see Nuremberg, but I should. I haven't seen Nuremberg or Napoleon. Two of the better, or at least critically acclaimed, historical movies recently, and I need to go see them. And I'm really, really, really excited for the Odyssey, just to see how Christopher Nolan looks at Greek culture and civilization after he just knocked it out of the park with Oppenheimer. In my opinion, one of the better, the probably the best movie I have ever, not the best movie I've ever seen, but the best movie I've ever seen in a theater is Oppenheimer. It just was astoundingly brilliant, extraordinarily artistically thoughtful and deep, full of huge moral and philosophical lessons. Um, on the smallest scale of how do you interact with other people, to the largest scale of how do you deal with the weight of killing 40,000 people in an instant and hundreds of thousands over time. What was something that happened in history that should have been impossible? Um, that's a good question. Something that happened in history that should have been impossible. Alexander's building of a ramp to basically destroy Tyre. That was not something that people would have expected to happen. That's a coming out of nowhere. The Americans beating the British in the American Revolution. That's a come out of nowhere. The Bolsheviks successfully taking over Russia. Go watch my live stream lectures and my videos. The Russian Revolution never should have ended with the Bolsheviks in power. Everyone was surprised. What's the best movie ever seen then? Yeah, Oppenheimer's amazing. I've seen other movies, that are better, classic movies, that are better, but I think Oppenheimer is the best movie I've ever seen sitting in a theater. Hello, Faraz. This is Edvard Munch's The Scream from 1895, and I wanted to go late 19th century Europe because that's the kind of period and time area where I would like to live. Before the Great War ruins everyone's utopianism, beautiful art and culture, everything going really, really well in society. British had the best navy, but not the greatest land army at what time? At that time. The British army is not as good as the French, maybe, but they're pretty much the best. The Prussians are considered the drill masters. The British have a navy, but the British also have a great army, and they were able to defeat Napoleon. I mean, they were able to defeat the French. The British know how to fight on land. Um, don't knock the British military. I want to apologize if the last time I made you mad, you were my friend, and I want you not to be mad at me. Well, I'm sorry that I got hot under the collar, but we were just going off on stuff that I didn't want to talk about. Did the movie 300 really happen? 300 Spartans versus a huge army of Persians. It's a horribly inaccurate movie. The 300 Spartans were led by one of their two kings and a man named Leonidas, and they fight this battle against the Immortals and the Persian army at Thermopylae, which is basically this corridor. The Persians are trying to get to and destroy Athens, and the Greeks are standing united for once to actually prevent that from happening. And about 1,000 other Greeks stay with the 300 Spartans. A man named Themistocles has a navy that is protecting the back. When his navy is defeated and he is forced to retreat, the Persians land a much larger force behind Leonidas and crush his forces into a sandwich. But before then, for several days, the Greeks had decimated the Persian army. So, um, yeah. Yeah, I get compliment on the lips all the time, Dorkly. Yeah, 300 was an insult to Persians. Free the Western world from Christianity and Jew God, worship God is not a Jew. I'm sorry, Jim. We're just not doing that today. We did too much of it yesterday. We do too much of it all the time. I indulge this. If you want to hear my thoughts on it, if you want to hear my thoughts on history, that's what you need to be here for. You need to be here to learn history. And if you want to learn about things from a historical perspective, if you're actually open to learning about this stuff, then talk to me about it. And if you want to know my perspective from a historical and give a historical perspective, a historian's perspective on certain current issues, that are motivating your topic. Please give a super chat, donate to the channel, help make this channel as great as possible. What would have started World War One if Franz Ferdinand didn't take the wrong turn? Oh yeah, I don't know. It might have been something else. I don't think that's the First World War, by the way. I think the French-Indian or 7 Years' War is the First World War. And a good afternoon to you, Derek. We're earlier than usual. Usually we start at 3, but we're starting at 1 because I have to get out of here after this. But we will be back at 6. So we've got a sandwich today, just like Leonidas, but in a good way. We've got a live stream now, and then to make up for the fact that we don't have our live stream at our normal time today, I decided to throw in an extra live stream. So I'll be back at 6 p.m. for another hour of Q&A with you guys. And yes, please like and subscribe. Can you tell us a quick summary of World War One? Okay, so again, the 7 Years' War, in my opinion, is the First World War. If Franz Ferdinand had taken a wrong turn, or Gavril Princip had bought that sandwich at that sandwich shop instead of walking, or had chosen not to buy a sandwich, then there wouldn't have been that war. But there would have been something that had blown it up. Germany was really, really worried about Russia's mobilization. A summary of it, I've done videos on it that you can go and watch at any time. But basically, the Great War starts in 1914. Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, dies. This is really important to Franz Josef, who is already the emperor of Austria-Hungary, who's already lost a son to suicide. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that word. And to unaliving himself. And now he's lost his nephew, who's going to be his heir apparent. And so this throws chaos into an already stagnant and ethnically divided empire. In order to, I'm giving it from the perspective of the Germans and the Austrians. We usually look at it from perspectives of the British, the French, and the Russians because we're Americans and we sided with them in that war. But Kaiser Wilhelm worried about an unstoppable Russian empire that will try to dominate the Balkans and continue to saw off his power in Eastern and Central Europe, as well as the French in the West, who have allied with the Russians. Basically tells the Austro-Hungarians that they can invade Serbia and he will back them up against the Russians because the Russians will not stand for the Austro-Hungarians attacking the Serbs. Because a Serbian nationalist killed um, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, his uncle wants revenge against the Serbians, and the Serbians aren't willing to really play ball with the Austrian demands. So, because of this, Austria-Hungary uh, attacks the Serbs. The Russians come to the defense of their Slavic allies. And this is all an excuse for Russia to gain more influence and power in the Balkans as well. Russia is not industrialized, but it is mobilized. It can mobilize and has a lot of men, and of course, it has a huge amount of land. So Russia is formidable, even if they are not as technologically and socially and economically developed as France, Great Britain, and Germany. So Russia will whip Austria-Hungary in many of their encounters, but struggle heavily against the Germans in northeastern Europe. In areas like that, the Galicia campaign, where Paul von Hindenburg, the guy who put Hitler in charge, uh, is around, is an embarrassment for the Russians. The Russian war effort will go so poorly that their economy will be so tied into keeping their forces in any semblance of of uh, of order, that they will basically run out of supplies. This will lead to breadlines, riots, and the Russian Revolution. The Germans hope to knock out, will come to the aid of the Austro-Hungarians, hoping to kick Russia out of the war. That doesn't happen. Or to kick the French out of the war and then take on the Russians. It's called the Schlieffen Plan. The French stand their ground and build up a bunch, and trench warfare ensues after the Germans go through Belgium. Going through Belgium angers the British, who honor and respect Belgian neutrality so much that they will come to the aid of the Belgians and actually ally with France, which is very rare for the British to do. And you will get Britain and France fighting on the Western Front in a series of trench warfares. So, in a series of trench warfare that is grueling, probably what you think of when you think of this war is the trench warfare, grueling, awful, long range campaigns that really huge battles that cost thousands of lives and lead to horrifying, devastating results for very little gain by either side in a standstill that isn't really undone until both the British blockade of the Germans, which leads to horrific amounts of suffering and starvation, and the backup of the Americans on the Western Front overwhelmed the German trenches in 1918 and eventually leads to their surrender. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Russian Empire, and the Turkish Ottoman Empire that all get involved in the fighting collapse and are destroyed and reorganized after the war. The communists establish power in Russia. The Middle East is created by France and Great Britain, and the United States, under their president, recommends a League of Nations that will reorganize the world system. The German Empire is collapsed, the Kaiser goes into exile, and the Weimar Republic takes over. So, Anyways, I have to charge my phone, so give me just a quick second. I will be right back. I'm still here. By the way, I will be just charging, so I'm moving away from my microphone and my usual spot to charge my phone and continue the discussion. But you wanted a quick summary of the Great War, World War One, what I call World War Two. You got it. Um, so let's see here. Okay. Uh, Amard, because here, great to see you. Uh, okay, so now we're charging. Now we're back. Okay, so the audio is going to change. Everything's going to change. Sorry if it's not as glamorous as usual, but I've got to get a charging strip over there so I can keep my phone charged without moving. Can we get a quick summary of the Canadians? The Canadians, as part of the British Empire, will fight in the war. They will be in the trenches with the British as well as Indian soldiers. They'll be fighting in Africa, Asia. The Germans will basically do everything they can with their submarine U-boats to destroy British supply lines. This includes attacking ships controlled by the Americans as well as the Argentinians. The Chinese and Japanese will eventually join the war on the side of the Allies. The Italians will renege on their peace treaty with Germany and Austria-Hungary to fight with the Allies, France and Great Britain. The impressive thing about the Great War is that Germany withstands this with a really weakened Austro-Hungarian and Turkish Empire, withstands the Allies and their growing number of allies for as long as they do. It's a testament to how powerful and strong Germany had become. So yeah, there you go, Benny. Let me see. Would you agree that the United Nations needs to be reformed, strengthened to survive as an international supreme organization? It needs to make the U.S. happy. No, we were treaty obligated to protect Belgium's neutrality, so we didn't have much choice. That's not true, Harry. The British could have stayed out of the war. Another world war the British could have stayed out of. The Germans did not expect the British to honor Belgian neutrality. The French didn't expect it either. It's kind of a surprise that Britain joins the war. It's one of those moments in British history where they decide they want to be European, they want to be involved in what it means to be European, because the British, because they are an island, have throughout their history been able to dip in and out of European politics and European affairs. So, um, let me see what else. Um, so, any other questions about history or social studies? Let me see. Plus, I would say that Britain and France have been aligning with each other since 1904. Though that's true, but they weren't allies. It's very, very important to note, if anyone is studying the Great War, that Britain and France, that Britain did not have to join the war. And the war probably would have been over a lot quicker with German victory had they not done that. Weren't the Germans scared of the Canadians in World War I because they did nighttime raids and other war crimes? Night war crimes were common. The use of mustard gas, barbed wire. There are so many things that you basically make regulations before the next World War to avoid some of these things. Um, Yeah, they blame the war on the Germans because the Germans lose, and that's common actually. The war guilt clause of the Treaty of Versailles, where the Germans are basically forced to admit that they are responsible for the war, has a devastating effect on German uh, national prestige, and it will be used by the Nazis uh, to basically justify um, um, German wussification and decline during and since the war. That they were forced to accept this is a sign of German decline, and that Germany should not be blamed for the war. If you buy into the notion, as many historians do, that the Nazis, that the mistreatment of the Germans at Versailles caused the next World War because of the war guilt clause and the heavy debt the French and the British demanded, you are buying Nazi propaganda. That's a lie. The Nazis came up with it. There's no doubt that the Treaty of Versailles was very harsh and hurt the status and prestige and the pride of the German people, and was not carried out in any sort of thoughtful, long-term way. It's not productive, and there is some of it does affect, obviously, the creation and formation of the world order that will cause the next world war. There's no doubt about it. But if you think that the Treaty of Versailles is the reason, and that Germany is the victim, and that the Treaty of Versailles causes the next war, and the war really just takes a pause for 20 years, that's Nazi lies. That's what the Nazis would have you believe. So, if you want to believe, and if it's true, it's true. It's not true, first of all. It's propaganda. I can show you that it's propaganda, but even if it was true, it's still something the Nazis believed. Could you explain why flat Earth to people is controversial, please? No, I'm not gonna do it. I don't want to talk about this stuff. Flat Earthism is ridiculous. It's an ancient concept. Um, Not even most of the people in world history knew the world was round or spherical. Who had any sort of education or knowledge on this topic knew the world was spherical. Archimedes, Plato, they all knew the world. These are ancient Greek philosophers. Ptolemy, they knew the world was spherical. Let me see here. It was the American civilian ship Lusitania that was carrying weapons to UK Germans sunk it because of their protests. Got nothing. The America entered the World War One or World War Two on the British side. Well, it was actually the Germans committing. They stopped for a while, then they said they were going to do it again. Unrestricted submarine warfare, where they would shoot down any ship that they had a suspicion was carrying supplies to Britain or France. You also have the fact that the Zimmerman telegram. The Germans tell the Mexicans that if America attacks them, they would like the Mexicans to ally with them and attack the Americans. They will give Mexico back the Southwest. Yes, it's a smoking jacket, Justin. I very much enjoy it. British officers bringing back Turkish tobacco after helping the Turks defeat the Russians in the Crimean War. Would Officer Corps would wear jackets like this, dressing gowns, after dinner when they would smoke to keep the smell and the dust off of their clothes. So that's why it's called a smoking jacket. Very historical. Did the crash of 29 lead to hardships for Germany paying the reparations that helped the Nazis get to power? Yes, Julian. In fact, that's the better, truer version of what actually happened at the end of the Great War or in the aftermath. Why did the Nazis come to power? That's the main reason. Um, the American economy collapses. Americans are covering the debt of the Germans from the Dawes Plan, which, again, people don't talk about because people want to accept a narrative, because people want to think history is inevitable for other reasons, and history is not inevitable. History is an ongoing tapestry of events and decisions made by contingent free will people in different contexts at different times with different ideas. Um, I hear dressing gown, I hear robe, I hear smoking jacket. They're all the same. Um, I'm just being very specific by calling it a smoking jacket. But yeah, the German economy just tanks after that. Far left and far right propaganda becomes extraordinarily common, and the German government eventually sides with what they would consider to be the far right and the Nazis. Although the Nazis are socialists, so square that circle if you can. Do you have any idea what the oldest civilization is? It's either the Indus River civilization or the Mesopotamians or the Egyptians. Unrestricted submarine warfare was basically Germany's version of the British blockade. Yes, that's true. And they had published articles in all U.S. newspapers and others telling people that if you went on the ships, we might sink you. Yes, those are leaflets. Those are warnings. He fancies himself Hugh Hefner. Not Hugh Hefner, History Hefner. And why are you timing him out? Um, do you think the moon landings actually happened? Yes, I do. Can Xi Jinping help bring socialism back to Europe? No. Do you know what the oldest religion is? Hinduism. It's likely the oldest ongoing religion is Hinduism. Is it the oldest religion? No. Ancient Chinese, polytheistic religions, the paganic religions of the Mesopotamians are probably older, but Hinduism is the oldest religion. Anyways, I'm sorry about having to downgrade my tech in order to charge my phone, but oh well, my fault for not charging it last night. Can everyone hear and see me okay? Hopefully there's not a bad lag like there was yesterday. Good. I'm glad to hear that. Other questions about history or social studies? And good, there's no lag. Lags have been a problem recently. They went away for a while, then they came back. So, other questions? Okay, I'm up to 7%. When can I go back to my spots? When can I go back and start? and put my microphone back in is what I'm wondering. Do you know anything about the Battle of Ivory? No, I don't. I don't even know what that is. I've never heard of it before. I don't know everything, and if I don't know something, I'm just gonna say I don't know something. What was the start of the Vietnam War? Well, the Vietnam War starts because of France demanding that the Vietnamese and the other Southeast Asian Chinese countries of Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam reaffirm their lordship and imperial control after the Japanese are kicked out at the end of the last World War, what you call World War II, and what I know is World War III. So, um, what started the Vietnam War? The U.S. gets involved because Ho Chi Minh and other radical communists in the area have become the heroes of the revolution, and they've kicked out the French. And the United States is extremely worried about communism spreading all over Asia and gaining more power and influence as the Cold War becomes more and more intense. So the U.S. sends military advisors and later a full-out army to stop communism. Communists in South Vietnam, known as the Viet Cong, and their allies in North Vietnam from overthrowing a very weak and corrupt but pro Western South Vietnamese government. The US was hoping for a repeat of the Korean War. They didn't get it. The South Vietnamese government was never fortified enough to actually withstand the incursions of the Viet Cong or their own political weaknesses. And would you agree that it was a mistake for Britain to join the European Economic Community in 1973? No, again, this is Britain with their whole we're European and we're not European. Britain has been struggling with this question for a long time. Um, Interesting. So today's history. I do daily today in history. I do born today, die today, and the daily events. I do that every day. So you guys can check that out when you want. But I've got a book I got for Christmas that actually has a list of all the events of each day. So I need to consult that in order to make my video. I don't know about it. I don't know about the Battle of Ivory. The North Vietnamese won, and their Chinese and Korean communist allies. Okay, Faraz is back. Is concept of nationalism a brainwash or is it human nature? It is human nature to divide ourselves and to think that one society or one group that is yours has something better because we all are individually like this. We all think that there is something about us that makes us better than almost everybody else, even if we acknowledge our faults and weaknesses about other things. Then we're still going to have something that gives us an edge, an advantage over someone else. And a civilization is made up of people who think this way, therefore civilization thinks this way. And civilizations have been thinking this way for a long time. And the people who really get inspired to believe in this are nationalists. Nationalism is not an aberration in human history, it's the default. The reason nationalism is considered relatively new is not because patriotism or pride in one's country has never existed. It's because the concept of the nation state isn't formed until the Peace of Westphalia, which I was talking about earlier, and empires have been the dominant force. So independence from empires on national ethnic grounds is a new concept. Empires rise and fall, but people breaking off and getting their independence from these empires is something new. So the Greeks do it in 1832, and I think that's what really causes the nationalist movements of the 19th century to blow up, like in Italy and Germany. And yes, it is Einstein's birthday. Communism spread all throughout Asia. The domino theory actually turned out to be correct. Laos and Cambodia both became communists. The communists in Cambodia were particularly nasty and virulent and violent. This led to the Vietnamese invading and overthrowing Pol Pot and ending the killing fields. China was already communist since 1949. Mongolia is the first communist country in Asia in 1922. And if you want to learn about that extensively, about all the communism in Asia, you can vote for that topic. That's one of the live stream lecture topics for tomorrow's live stream lecture at 4 p.m. Eastern. I'll be lecturing on a particular topic. The options are France in the 1600s, that's Louis XIV and Versailles. You can learn about the scholastic movement and the creation of the European university system during the Middle Ages. You can learn about communism in Asia, and or you can learn about the Roaring Twenties. So a lot of fun topics on the table for you guys potentially tomorrow. And if you have a topic you want me to discuss, comment on the post and recommend it, and it can appear as an option. And if enough people vote for it on the channel, friendly neighborhood historians, people who like and subscribe, then it might be a topic I lecture on. By the way, if you want to become a member, be an official Friendly Neighborhood Historian, you get all sorts of perks, including early access and extra videos and things like that. So yeah, think about that. But no pressure. FDR was the best American president. Prove me wrong. Lincoln. There, I proved you wrong. FDR put hundreds of thousands of Japanese people into camps. FDR's economic policies did not solve the Great Depression. In fact, they may have worsened or prolonged it. FDR got way too buddy-buddy with a genocidal maniac who wanted to control the world known as Joseph Stalin. Yeah, FDR is not the best president. He's a good president, but I have a camp that FDR is overrated. Sorry. It's a good question. I know why a lot of people love him. I know Social Security, the FDIC, unemployment insurance were great things. I know that he got the country through the Depression and the war. The war got him out of a depression, and then Roosevelt got them through the war. I think he is a much better president in terms of handling the war than he is economically and socially. He is not the paragon of virtue that people think he is. He is not a moral person in his own personal life, a constant philanderer, whose wife was also a constant philanderer with other women. Um, Regardless of their personal marks, FDR refused to pass anti-lynching legislation because of Southern Dixiecrats that he needed to support his New Deal programs. FDR didn't do much to help civil rights. FDR put hundreds of thousands of Japanese people into camps. I'm repeating it. I'm paralleling the end of my statement at the beginning because nobody talks about that it was FDR that did that. We could have kept the empire even if a limited way. Yep, okay, you're entitled to your wrong opinion. The US would have never stand about that. Why are we blocking what Sabir says? Okay, so he says, what do you think of Epstein theory? Give me a super chat, Sabir. It's good to see you, but you got to give me a super chat because I'm not going to talk about the invasion of Iran or if it's a cover up for the Epstein files or any of that nonsense because I'm a historian. I will give a historical perspective on this, and I can give you the history of US regime change if you give a super chat. But don't come in asking a bunch of loaded questions. Does this have anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein and covering it up? Everybody on the left says that, but that doesn't make it true. That's political rhetoric. Um, I actually know enough about the history of Iran and US regime change in different areas of the world to actually enlighten people. So, Sabir, when your timeout is over, you can come back to the classroom and you can ask a respectful question or you can give a super chat. So, Stalin saved the world. Stalin killed 20 to 30 million people. And that's not even counting the war. And I think it's Churchill and Roosevelt who are closer to being the ones who saved the world, not Stalin. Stalin was allies, or at least had a non-aggression pact with Hitler, invaded Poland right after the Nazis did. Wanted to work with Hitler so that Hitler could destabilize Europe and he could spread communism everywhere. And if you read what the Soviets did to the Germans and the Eastern Europeans at the end of the war, you might think a little differently. General Vang of Laos lived in my city and got in trouble for continuing to agitate in Laos because hostilities with the US had ceased. Sounds about right. There's a lot of dissidents like that. Alexander Kerensky taught at Stanford. Was Stalin right to intern liberated Red Army prisoners of war? Um, no, of course he wasn't. But that's Stalin. Brutality. You have failed me for the last time. In many ways, it's like he's like Darth Vader, except in Hawaii because there were too many Japanese to imprison them all. That's true. Good for Hawaii. Hawaii. Let me see. Let me see. Hot take. Religion means any ideology that claims to be absent truth and gets organized. It usually includes theology, but not necessarily. Okay, for us, stop talking about religion all the time. Stop trying to draw attention to a topic that I'm already tired of discussing. If you want me to give a perspective on a particular religious issue, give me a super chat. Otherwise, I'm not talking about it. Stalin won World War II. World War III, first off, I think it's World War III. Stalin won it because he was allied with the United States and Great Britain. And you could say that, oh, they needed him. Well, he needed them. And if you look at who gave whose supplies, it's not Stalin giving supplies to the Allies. It's the Allies giving supplies to Stalin. Why some say that it's important for Americans to know about the history of Iran? You mean, why do I say it's important for Americans to know that? Because you're at war with a country, you should understand why things are the way they are, so maybe you don't make the same geopolitical mistakes the US has made in 1953 and 1979. Go read my Substack article on this. That's a really loaded question for us. Stalin was a food thief. He literally stole Ukrainian food so they starve and Russians can eat. Not even that. He starved them because they were belligerent, because they didn't want to give up their old ways of life. And this led to millions of people starving to death, tens of thousands a day in Ukraine. I've had a friend from Washington, D.C. He was a YouTube channel and he talks about the history of Iran, but he is American. I mean, I'm a history channel. I talk about the history of Iran. I have several videos about this. I wrote a Substack article about it. I go into a lot of detail about all of these things. And I really, really think that people should learn the history before they make some sort of broad-reaching statement, like calling it Operation Epstein Fury, or waving American flags, thinking that this is the best thing that ever happened to the Iranian people, because people being killed is not a great thing. 1953 wasn't a mistake. It was a dominant move, and Iran was dependent on Britain and America for 20 years. Well, and from a geopolitical perspective, the United States messed up in 1979. It was a terrible, terrible blunder. They should have never let the Shah fall. Whatever you think of the Shah morally, compare it to what replaced him. It's the same thing with Saddam. It's the same thing with Gaddafi. It's the same thing with all these people. Brutal, nasty dictators who are terrible people. Yep, absolutely. Who replaces them? What do you get instead? You get ISIS. You get migrant refugee crises all over the world. You get the Taliban replacing the Taliban in Afghanistan after 20 years of war and tens of thousands of people dying. And then you get the mullahs of Iran who are genocidal, replacing the Shah, who was an ally of the US. Sorry, but if you're an American, that's the worst trade deal in the history of trade deals. That's a stupid, stupid outcome. In 1979, I was approached by other high school students threatening me due to my thick beard and wire glasses because they thought I was Iranian. Now that's not cool, Julian. That's really awful. What if Trotsky wrangled control of the party away from Stalin? Could he have resisted Barbarossa? World history would have been far different because Trotsky would have lobbied for civil wars and revolutions, and probably would have gotten a few off of the ground into the 30s, to the point where the international community probably would have stepped in to crush the Soviet Union. I don't see things turning out the same way at all. Stalin choosing to keep communism in the Soviet Union and not deliberately, belligerently, incorrigibly spread it all throughout the rest of the known world is probably what saved the Soviet Union. Trotsky, and people say, well, Trotsky was more intellectual. Trotsky understood Marxism better. Trotsky would have been a better leader. Stalin's just the brute. No. Trotsky's global revolution plans would have killed hundreds of millions of people if they had come to fruition. Nobody knows this because intellectual communists are cool and sexy. And guess what? They're not. By the way, Stalin frame-mogged Trotsky out of power. And if you look at a picture of Stalin when he was young, he mogs a lot of guys. I don't like Stalin. I think he's a nasty guy, but facts are facts. So, anyways, I never have loved the argument that Trotsky would have been better than Stalin for the world. I don't think he would have been able to resist Barbarossa. Now, let's say Trotsky's in charge and everything works out the way it does, which is impossible because he's a totally different person than Stalin with a totally different agenda. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that he does, and Barbarossa happens. Trotsky's a brilliant military leader. I don't know how. I think it goes better for the Soviets if he's in charge at that point, militarily speaking. Hello, Mac. Great to see you. Will you be making no, again. No, no. Mac, you're going to be disappointed. I'm not doing that tonight. Again, how do you propose that Jimmy Carter and the Europeans keep the Shah in power? Giving whatever military support the Shah needed to retain power. Realizing that this was a communist insurgency and realizing that the radical Muslims were your enemy. So yeah, sorry, Harry. What do you think about this opinion? Oftentimes, the anti-symmetrical enemies are more dangerous than the symmetric enemies. So you could never have done something like 9/11. Yeah, but the Soviet Union yeah, the Soviet Union never did that, but they supported regimes and governments that they did that to their own people in many ways, terrorizing their own people, and they supported governments and regimes that were more than willing to kill as many Americans as possible. It was the use of nuclear weapons and the fear of that probably avoided a land war. Without nuclear weapons in the picture, there might have very well been a third world war in the 20th century in the 50s or 60s between the Soviet Union and the United States. Imagine if the Cuban Missile Crisis happens, but it's the Bay of Pigs, there's no nuclear weapons in the picture, and the Soviet Union invades Western Europe. That's probably a much more likely outcome. And then you have a large land war that's just as brutal as the last two world wars with more countries involved. The United States invades Cuba, the European and sends huge amounts of men there. Japan, Korea becomes a fight. You've already got Vietnam. I mean, it would have been absolutely insanity. Um, so, am I praising Stalin? Yes, I am saying that there is a pic. Yes, Stalin. That yes, believe it or not, Stalin was actually quite handsome when he was young. I'm not saying anything good about him other than that. I am saying that Stalin frame mogged Trotsky, literally and physically, literally and figuratively. Hello, Melody. Should Switzerland be wiped off a map? Hitler thought about doing this actually. Stalin was not as yeah. It's a moniker. It's a nom de plume or nom de guerre. Call it means man of steel. So, anyways, any other questions? We've got about 5 minutes left in the chat. And I'm gonna have to do a hard line in at an hour instead of going over like I almost always do. Well, yes, both had nuclear weapons. Both were equally powerful and symmetrical in the sense of power structure. But when U.S. was fighting Al Qaeda, only one person had nukes, which is why they fought a direct war. There's only been one time in history where two countries have fought a war when they're both nuclear, and that was India and Pakistan last year. No, I'm not attracted to a young song. I am saying he is good looking. I'm sorry, but he is. Especially, I'm using the cadence and lingo of today to explain figuratively and literally what happened. Stalin pushed Trotsky out of power. He frame mobbed him. So you said you like Afghan food. Of course I do. I like food from all types of the world, all areas of the world. And yes, I've tried Afghan food. Have you read The Fourth Turning, and what do you think about it? What is The Fourth Turning? I've never read it. Mm. Doing this channel, all the other stuff I have to do in my life, I do not read as much as I'd like to. There are certain times where I'm able to, but what should I name my baby? Uh, what should I name my baby? Napoleon. I don't remember the name of it. It was some years ago that I tried it. I'm being 100% real. I would not lie about this. I wouldn't lie just to impress people. If I don't know something about history, I don't start lying about it. I don't know what it was. It was sort of like they were like dumplings with beef inside of them, but they were soft and not heavy pastry, and it was really, really delicious. What do you think would who do you think would win in a fight, Stalin or Lenin? Like a physical fight? They're both pretty cowardly, probably Stalin. Um, something of all those communist leaders, they're pretty cowardly. Even Trotsky. Yep, there you go. Napoleon Dynamite. We'll be back at 6 for another hour if you want more Q&A, and I'm doing that as a bonus because I'm not doing my usual time of 3 o'clock. So, yeah. Um, what do you think of Henry Ford? Excellent inventor, brilliant mastermind. I think probably one of the greatest examples of capitalism done right in history. The capital deepening, improving his laborers, specialization and stratification of the labor force, the assembly line, all of these things I think made the the industrial revolution put it's the apex, it's the zenith of economic opportunity given by the factory to the workers um of the time. I also think he's also a horrific anti-Semite and crypto Nazi, so yeah, that's bad. Will you ever show feet on stream? How much money will you give me to show my feet on stream? Are we really gonna go down this road, Bubba? Um, so yeah. Anyways, other questions. Yep, you too, Ricky. So one more minute. Let's see. We might have time for one or two more questions. How significant was Kirov's assassination in rallying supporting Stalin's purges that he orchestrated? Um, well, Stalin used whatever he could to be an excuse to hunt someone down and kill them. That's what he did to Trotsky, Lev Kamenev, Kirov. All of these people were trodden underfoot, and basically Stalin used the purges as a show trial to kill off as many people as he could who he thought were not loyal to him. because he was the revolution. Yep, Kevin, it's what I do. It's fun. And Kevin, by the way, has the emoji because he is a member. So consider becoming a member if you haven't already. It's a book about how civilizations go in cycles: rejuvenation, awakening, destabilization, crisis, repeat, and how America's on the fourth cycle. Oh yeah, I know this. Yeah, it takes then it's a cycle of every 60 years, so it's about 240 years for the entire cycle to go. And yeah, I've heard of the turning cycle. It's an interesting concept. Rome, if you look at its empire, really is dominant from its inception in 30 BC, and you go 250 years after that would be about 220 AD, which is interesting because that's when the crisis of the third century really gets going and the empire starts to falter. It has a recovery briefly under Constantine and Diocletian, but then 250 years after the 220, the cycle, you could say, repeat starts, and then you end up with 250 years after that is the collapse of the empire in 476. So that'd be kind of interesting to apply it to the Romans and see that it happened twice. The Romans got uh, a second wind, if you will. Will the Americans get that? I have no idea. If I become a member, what emojis should I choose? Any of the ones. It's different based off of what tier membership you have. Yep. And I have bonus Q&As, bonus all of it. So yeah. So there's just some stuff. I'll pin that message from Kevin, who's such a great supporter of the channel. Been here for a long time, I think 2 years. Do you love Victorian England? Absolutely. Heard of Hegel, Meyer, God's Rabbit? No, Dennis. Sounds kind of fun. Let me see. Armor Meat Company invented the assembly line to take part of cows, pigs, saw it, and invented the assembly line to put cars here. Interesting. I did not know that, Zach. They did have that in meat processing plants. There were definitely the concepts of a plan. There were the outlines of this specialization before Ford. Ford didn't invent it. I will have to look him up. What's his name? Hegel Meyer. I'll have to look him up and probably do a video about him, Dennis. Thank you for recommending him. Somebody asked me to look up something or look into it. I'm more than happy to do so. Can you think about a hot take about Victorian era? Um, yeah, it's not as conservative as people think it is. You have Jack the Ripper. Um, you have this. You have the novels of the time, like Wuthering Heights, the Brontes, Jane Eyre. These are really countercultural, but they're extremely popular for a reason. And I also would say it's not this super rich versus super poor issue like Dickens. People get that misinterpret Dickens that way. I don't think Dickens is saying that. And if you want to listen to Dickens, you can listen to me read The Christmas Carol. It was a Christmas special I did in 2024. Who were the first people to inhabit Crete? The Minoans. I have not read Around the World in 80 Days. Are we Rome? Because the empire wasn't destroyed but fell apart over time. Could be. But then you have to say the Byzantines, the Eastern Romans, continue for another 1,000 years. So that cycle with them is interesting. So apply that cycle to an empire. Apply it to the British when their empire really gets going. I'd say 1763, after they win the First World War, the 7 Years' War, is really when the British Empire starts to get going as an international force. 240 years, 250 years after that is 1913. World War comes up. Soon after that, it's after the next World War. Within a century, Britain starts to come apart. So the worlds all strive towards. I don't know what that means, Moped Mike. So yeah. There's so many books about feminism and slavery and socialism and okay. Were the Minoans before the Etruscans? All right, so I'm gonna wrap up. We're just over 63 minutes, so you got a couple of extra minutes with me. Usually I go over. But yeah, join us back here at 6 p.m. Eastern for more Q&A, more history, and check and vote on the live stream lecture topic for our live stream lecture tomorrow at 4, and check out all the long and short form content we have for you. Like and subscribe on your way out, and I will see you, if not later today, then later on in the channel.